Yeah, happy IoT Day, Ian.
Well, thank you, Benjamin. I hear you're in Paris at Devox, so lots of IoT things going on at Devox.
Yeah. Actually, more than what I expected. There is even an IoT a connected objects showroom, which unfortunately I didn't have time to check just yet because we are very busy on the Eclipse Foundation booth. Lots of people interested in learning more about the Eclipse Foundation and what we do in IoT, what we do in modeling, etc. So yeah, it's a nice conference, and it's good to be home. I mean, it's been 2 years, I think, since I haven't done a big conference where most of the attendees are speaking French. So I'm working on my French.
I'm sure that's hard for you.
Yeah, sort of. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. So, well, what we're going to do is to celebrate IoT Day is to talk about the survey results. I think with any hangout, we'll do this recording, but if people do join, we certainly are open to questions from the audience. So, but I think so. Why don't we put a link? So there's a slide presentation for the survey. I don't want to go through the slide presentation. I think it would be more interesting just for you and I to have a discussion about what we found interesting in the survey, and also kind of get feedback from people. So I think that the link is in the showcase.
Yeah, it should be showing up right now. And if you guys have any questions, any comments on the survey, so there is this Q&A feature in Google Hangouts. So if you're watching from the Google Events page, you should be able to figure out how to open the Q&A, ask a question. You can actually also ask, if you'd like, you ping us on Twitter. We are Eclipse IoT on Twitter, or you ping us in the Q&A if you want to join the conversation live. That would be fun as well, I think, because I mean, yeah, there are lots of interesting results in the survey, and it would be great to see what you guys think.
Yeah. So So if you want to just to reinforce, if you want to watch, that's fine. But if you want to come in and join the conversation with us, just let Benjamin and I know, and we'll bring you into the conversation too. So Benjamin, I thought let me share. So I said I'm not going to use slides, but I want to share my screen. So can you see that?
Yes, I can. Yeah.
So I think one of the things that kind of you and I have been doing IoT, or we used to do M2M, but kind of now the cool name is IoT. But I think this slide was kind of interesting to me, right? What are the company's plans for doing IoT solutions? And 45% are actually doing real stuff today, and they're kind of deploying things today. And I think that's quite telling. That there's tons of hype around it, IoT, but I think people are doing real things. And we had a conversation before that there is, I think some of this is kind of rebranding, renaming things. Like certainly in the embedded world, people have been writing kind of applications for devices, and now it's getting rebranded IoT, but those embedded devices are being redone to connect to the internet and be more sophisticated. But I think the cool thing is that people definitely are doing stuff.
Yeah, as you said, I mean, if you think about automotive and healthcare, I mean, this has been around forever, and it probably used to be called M2M. Now it's IoT. The technology is slightly different, but yeah.
Yeah, and so there's another one I want to kind of, let me just find that slide. So kind of what individuals' experiences are, and of course I'm not going to be able to find it quickly. Oh, what happened here? Sorry. It's just more kind of what their experience level of people responding to the survey. And
so how many people actually responded to the survey?
Yeah, I guess we should. Yeah. So we had 392, I think it was 93 respond. And I think kind of with any survey like this, there's always bias with this, but what we try to do is get as many diverse respondents pool as possible. So we promote it from the Eclipse.org site, we promote it from our social media channels, but we also use the members of the working group to promote out through their channels to attract developers in. So there's certainly bias in it in terms of our community, but I think it does kind of get a good representation of what in general developers are doing around IoT. But a good question. So it's 392, and those aren't complete. All of them weren't completes. I think about 35 we actually disqualified if you had said you had no experience with IoT. So it's kind of to give everyone an idea. And actually, I just found that slide that I wanted to share with kind of what's your individual experience with IoT. And so here, and I think kind of this is the kind of the flip side is that people are still learning, certainly learning about IoT. So if you're in the IoT industry, I think there's lots of opportunities to attract developers to your solutions. They're out there learning. They want content to help them understand. But there's also good momentum in terms of people doing real stuff.
And so what do you think are the typical resources that developers use right now to learn more about IoT?
Well, so I've been a big fan of the accessible hardware, like the Arduinos, the Raspberry Pis. Like, if you ask me, we wouldn't be where we are with IoT without that, especially in the developer community, because kind of this bottoms-up innovation with developers. What the kind of the accessible hardware, the Raspberry Pis, right, make possible is that you don't actually have to go out and buy $1,000 piece of hardware to get going, right? You can have
tools as well. This kind of hardware that you just described, sometimes you also need to buy a super expensive set of an IDE and all the tools and the dongles, right, to secure the. I mean, this is an IDE that you can't even easily share with your colleagues. So yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and so if you think about it, right. Before that whole maker community kind of started, right, developing one of these types of applications was a long multi-year process and very expensive to get going, right? And so I think that's been a huge enabler. And let me just share another slide, because I think this is really telling, right? So we asked kind of, have you used accessible hardware? And I specifically chose the word accessible hardware because some people use open hardware, which I'm fine with, but Raspberry Pi really isn't open hardware. But I think it's been hugely influential. And so if you look at this slide, right, that I think it's like 80% of people who responded have some experience with accessible hardware. So and I see this over and over again when I'm talking to people, is that kind of the prototyping is being done on Arduinos and Raspberry Pis, right, and the tools around it, right? And then when they go into production, some people are taking this into production, but then they will upgrade the hardware to the more kind of industrial grade hardware, right? Have you seen that, Benjamin?
Yeah. You're showing. So yeah, it's basically the same. I mean, probably like 20, maybe 15 years ago, it was the same. I mean, the web and probably the web 2.0 got real only when it was really easy for people to install a Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP stack on their PC, right? Until then, it was just too difficult. You needed an actual server where you would deploy your applications and stuff. But if you can actually develop locally, then that's a different story. And same for the Arduino, and yeah.
Yeah, well, and I think kind of the other enabler is the open source software, right? Like 5 years ago, and this is kind of, it's all related, right? Is that you couldn't actually have it's really hard to have an open source project that's targeting embedded hardware, right? Because to have an open source project, you it's permissionless software, right? You should be able to download software and run it, right, without asking anyone permission, right? And to in the embedded world, right, before the accessible hardware, you basically you'd have to go and buy a piece of hardware, and they would have to ship it to you, right? And usually there's partner agreements and stuff like that in place, right? And so from an open source community, software community, it was pretty well impossible to have software, but that's all changed now, right? And we at Eclipse, with our Eclipse IoT community, can have lots of different technology, software technology that's running on these accessible platforms that then can also use on different hardware platforms. So I think that's been a huge enabler. And I think the software is going to kind of reduce a lot of the complexity in this area.
Yeah, this is certainly where the developer community can start growing, right? People can start blogging and creating tutorials, and they're actually happy to share what they've been doing, and other people can improve, comment, and that's exactly what we're seeing at Eclipse IoT, right? We've been putting together some tutorials, like the famous greenhouse, as people call it, and we see it being run on different platforms and being improved over the years. So, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So why don't we ask our viewers? I see we do have a few people on. Does anyone want to come in and talk about what they've been doing with Raspberry Pis and kind of what's making your life easier with doing development for IoT? Don't be shy. Maybe Benjamin, you could pick on some. I don't have the list of yours. I don't know.
Unfortunately, I don't have it either. So just ping us in the Q&A or ping us on Twitter, either Ian, myself, or the Eclipse IoT Twitter account. It'd be great to see if you guys watching us right now are recognizing yourselves in the results. Like, I mean, for example, Ian, I think you have some figures about what would be the languages, the programming languages that most developers use. I would say I'm not surprised, I think, by the top 3. But then there are some interesting results.
Let me bring it up. So can you see that?
I think it's coming. Yep.
Yeah. So the top 3 with Java, C, and JavaScript. I think so. I think, and this is probably a bias in the survey results, because I don't think Java is that dominant in IoT. Certainly, like if you go into the Raspberry Pi community, Python is incredibly popular there, right? So I think there's a bit of bias in these results, but I do believe that Java is very popular in IoT and very relevant in IoT, especially on the back end, like kind of with our projects, right? With Leshen and Cura, right? And not necessarily on the back end, but kind of on the edge. The Java is being used quite a bit.
And I think we probably see also Android developers showing up in those results. They do use Java on their Android phone to do NFC and to do data visualization for basically the end user application as well.
Yeah, for sure. But I think it's.
I agree.
It's going to be a polyglot world, right? Like there's not one language going to be used in IoT. JavaScript is it's going to be interesting. Like there's the hardware platforms, the JavaScript oriented, like the Spinos and the Tesla and stuff. Mm-hmm. So it'd be interesting to see how far JavaScript goes. And with these types of surveys, what's interesting is when you can start looking at trends, right? And so next year we hope to do it again and look at trends to see kind of what's different. So I think that some of the other things that we kind of came out of the survey. Let's talk about messaging because let me bring up the messaging one. I think there's still a debate, and I think it's valid. Is kind of why not use just the existing web standards? Why do we need all these new IoT standards like MQTT, CoAP, right? And I think it's a valid question. I think it's still kind of out there what's the answer, and in reality it's going to be okay. the answer is both. You need both, right? Depending on the use case. But what we asked kind of what people's messaging protocols were, and you could answer more than one. And HTTP was way out in front, and MQTT had a really strong showing. And this is very consistent with what I see out there, that MQTT's got a lot of adoption. It's got a lot of momentum, but there's lots of people using HTTP too, right? So I think some of the other protocols, it's certainly not too late. Like I think Co-op's got some interesting technology behind it, and interesting people using it, right? There's certainly kind of room for growth there. And some of the other ones. So quite frankly, what did surprise me is that in-house and proprietary were so low. Because kind of the stereotype, or maybe it's just right, is that a lot of the existing IoT solutions were very proprietary. And I would have thought those would have been a bit higher.
Well, actually, I was about to say sort of the contrary, but I think to your point earlier, we'll see next year, right? Because right now it's like 25% if we add in-house and proprietary protocols in general. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if next year it would be way less, especially as you said. I mean, HTTP2 is coming, and MQTT is basically mainstream right now. You were talking about, I mean, I'm at Devox this week, and everyone is talking about MQTT, even people who don't do IoT, because for messaging it just works. Same for Co-op. We see more and more people using Co-op. So
yeah,
hopefully this is going to be in lieu of using proprietary protocols.
Yeah. So I think that the other interesting kind of feedback was concerns. Kind of when you're thinking about IoT, what are some of your concerns? And no surprise, security was the top concern. And this is like you can't kind of any article being published around IoT and kind of the concerns around IoT, security is always going to be number one.
I think you're sharing. Sorry, I think you're sharing a black screen right now. So I don't know if you went maybe full screen without sharing your wall desktop or something. Maybe looks like you're.
Does that work? Let me just stop again, and just one sec. We'll try it again. You see that now?
So Neil, yeah, we do see it. So Neil on Twitter, feel free to join if you want to actually join the discussion live. Neil is commenting on Twitter that he definitely agrees that low-cost IoT infrastructure and hardware simplifies and makes IoT more accessible to developers. So that's great to hear. And yeah, Neil, if you want to just quickly post a question on the Q&A so as I know how to invite you, and we'd be happy to have you live. So yeah, back to so Ian, the main concerns where I think yeah we see it. So security is like wow.
Yeah, security is off the chart. We're kind of way up there, and that's not surprising. Kind of my pet peeve though is okay. Well, okay, kind of what are people doing about security, right? How are they solving it, right? I would love to have some open source technology being developed at Eclipse to solve security. So if anyone knows of things, feel free to get in touch with Benjamin or so.
Yeah, in the Co-op ecosystem, we're going to get a DTLS implementation. You may have seen the tiny DTLS proposal. So for people who do Co-op and who basically want to secure their Co-op sockets, then we're going to get that open source implementation with, again, as we always do at Eclipse, with a business-friendly open source license, so as people can be quite confident when they include the library in their commercial products. But that's, yeah, I mean, we need more certainly, and yeah, as Ian said, please ping us if you know of any existing open source projects that you think would be relevant for IoT security.
Yeah, and I think the other one that's definitely relevant for what we're doing is around interoperability, right? So kind of projects like OM2M definitely are helping with interoperability and Polytech, but also just having the different standards being implemented at Eclipse IoT, I think is going to help with interoperability down the road, because what's interesting is when we have our project meetings, like there's some really good discussions on at the technology level on how to solve some of these challenges. So I think I think we're well positioned to help with some of these concerns at Eclipse. So what else did I have? Let me see. I guess I think the operating system. So let me just kind of stop sharing there.
Do you have more info on the geographical? I mean, the people who answered, are they more in North America, Europe? Do you have that?
You know, I didn't track it. I didn't track it. I probably should have. It's like with, I don't know about you, but when I do these types of surveys, I kind of fill out these surveys, I hate it when there's kind of all these long questions to fill out. So yep. I really tried to keep it short. And in the end, kind of the geography might have been interesting, but it was just one of those questions I thought, you know what, I'm just going to pass on that one. So, yeah. So I didn't ask it. Operating systems. So yeah, Linux, right? It's completely dominant, right? I'm a bit surprised it's so high. Actually, some people were surprised when I gave this presentation to the working group yesterday. Some people were surprised that Windows Embedded was so high, which I can understand.
So high or so low?
Pardon me? So Windows Embedded was so high.
Well, yeah. Well, I guess maybe people. Maybe this also apply for Windows, and some people are actually using like Windows and the Raspberry Pi and stuff like that, and they did answer Windows. I don't know. Same for Linux. Basically, it's probably very high again because that would be where people using Android would have basically they would answer Linux, I guess, to a question like this. I don't know.
Yeah. So, but it's yeah, and I think like Linux is kind of is so pervasive now, and continue to be pervasive, right? So this it doesn't really surprise me. So I think those are kind of the key things that I got out of the survey. Like I said, we did the presentation. There's a presentation of 26 pages. So there's other content in there, but and again, when I look at these types of surveys, it's I don't think this is the gospel, right? It's just one data point, understanding the biases that are there, but then comparing it to other surveys that you see and just what you see in the street. So I think, and so I want to end with something, because we are all about open source at Eclipse, and I think we asked, because with hardware,
again, you're not sharing your screen. I guess you need to go to do the full screen sharing.
I am doing the full screen sharing. I don't know,
aren't you? Yeah.
We'll just blame. I'm going to blame Google, because all of my problems I blame on Google now.
Yeah, I think for Hangouts, unfortunately, I think you're right.
You know what? But I love Hangouts. I think it's the best software out there. So. Yeah.
UI could be.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's
that better?
Okay. Yeah, it does.
Yeah. So we asked, what's your company's policy about using open source technology? And I wanted to ask this because, and maybe it's my bias, but historically, putting open source software on a device has been there's been a lot of resistance, right? And so I was incredibly pleased to see that well over 80% of the response, their companies have policies that allow them to use open source. We also qualified how do you participate, right? But even then, it's doing real well. And this correlates. Like there's another study that I was seeing that kind of over 75% of people are using open source in their enterprise, and so this correlates really nicely with that. That I think it's a kind of a statement that certainly in the last 5 years, open source has become so dominant in the technology industry as a whole that you just have to be open to using it. And I think for what we're doing at Eclipse and Eclipse IoT, this makes us very well positioned for that, right? That kind of our goal is that we want Eclipse IoT to be the open source community for IoT technology, and this is the reason, right? Is because everyone's going to be using open source, and having one community as being the source for it, I think it makes it easier for people to find the relevant technology. So.
Yeah, there is actually a question or a comment rather on Twitter from Praku, about, and I think that was probably showing up in what is currently one of the problems in IoT and what's missing. And Praku is asking whether us as Eclipse IoT are organizing any workshop, maybe on Google Hangouts, for people who want to start off with IoT. So if you want to learn more about Eclipse and IoT development in general, we have a bunch of tutorials on the Eclipse IoT website. But we've been also thinking about, producing basically more of those workshops and stuff. So if you are interested in like having actual trainings about MQTT, etc., feel free to let us know what you would actually like to learn. I think I agree that there is still some missing critical content for people who would like to learn more about IoT. So check out our tutorials, but if you think something's missing, just let us know what you'd like to learn, and we certainly will try to work on filling the blanks.
Yeah, well, and also I think it's the tutorials, but we also have a YouTube channel.
We do have
webinars.
Lots of Hangouts. Some of them are actually quite technical. If you want to learn about IPv6 and 6LoWPAN and how to use co-op, well, we've had a very interesting discussion with Matthias from the Californian project, and we have actually one of our most popular content ever is one of the very first webinars we did about MQTT with IBM folks, and maybe also one of the co-founders of IBM of MQTT. So yeah, thanks Ian for sharing the link. Hopefully,
yes, just so I put the link.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, we'll put it in the comments on the Google.
Okay, but we've got a ton of content on the YouTube channel. But I think the point's still valid though, is that lots of developers are still learning about IoT, and we need to make it as easy as possible. So we've got the tutorials, we've got the sandbox servers, but check out their getting started page on iot.eclipse.org. That's kind of where I would recommend. Let me, Benjamin, why don't you put the getting started link there too?
Yeah.
But that's where I recommend.
And again, if you guys think something is missing in there, just let me know to fix that. And yeah, I mean, I think the technology is there. It's been there for a couple of years now, and MQTT and the like. So there are Arduinos, as we said, but yeah, maybe some more tutorials. Maybe you'd like to learn more on some topics. So just let us know.
Yeah. So I think we've rambled on enough. Again, if there's any questions, if anyone wants to come on and chat with us right now, it'd be fun. But any final thoughts, Benjamin?
Yeah, I'm having a final look at Twitter. I don't think we have other questions. I think one of the next meeting point for us is going to be, I think we're going to be back with our virtual IoT meetups, right? So back to the point of learning more and having workshops and stuff. I think we are starting to line up some interesting presentations about data analytics for IoT and using OSGI for IoT, and what else do we have? Yeah, I think we should be back in the next couple of weeks, right? Yep,
for sure. So, all right. Okay, well, thank you, Benjamin, and thank you everyone who joined us and who watched this on as the recording, and certainly go and check out the slides. We'll post a bunch of links for this event on the events page for reference. We'll chat again soon, Benjamin.
Yeah, take care, Ian. Bye-bye, everyone. Thanks for joining.